We're here today with Hart Steen, and we are very excited, Hart, to have you be a part of our event in November, Wisdom for a World in Transition. We think you're very appropriate for this theme, and you'll be one of our last speakers because by the time we get to the end, we want someone who can help us carry this wisdom into the future. So we have a few questions that we think would be appropriate for our audience. And one of the things that I'd like to know right off the bat is what inspired you to connect the stars with human consciousness?
There's so many different ways to answer that question, but for me, it was a mind-blowing experience. I went through something on March 3rd of my 33rd year, so a bunch of weird synchronicities that really kind of hadn't happened or culminated before in my life. And then at that, I had stuff come through, downloads, all of these things that I couldn't explain. And so I had to go on a journey to figure that out. And pretty quickly along the journey, see, I grew up as as a Southern Baptist in Louisiana, and you don't really look to the stars for information. That's not okay,
No,
right?
no, I get.
So these things really started to became obvious. Like there's something about them. I don't know why I need to pay attention to the stars. But as I was picking up all of these downloads and I would get drawings, it always would draw back to the sky. Even in my first drawing, there that I got this big download. There's a big vortex that's like the center of the Milky Way. That's the black hole that I had no idea about any of this, right? And it sounds so odd saying it. As you start to look in deeper and deeper, you realize, wow, those stars, while they're just dots, they're just a bunch of hot gas and light and all of this stuff on one level. On the human consciousness level, they're they're the tapestry that we choose and chose to put vast amount of meaning in that can extend for a really long period of time. When you recognize this, you realize, oh my gosh, like if we're talking about passing on information, you and I can have this conversation, just in passing with you and I in physical space together. That lasts for a moment. We can record it like we can now with technology, and that might be, however long you can access that, that video file or that audio file. We can write it down, but that lasts as long as there are people that can read, and as long as the medium can, hold fast within the environment. Paper breaks down, rocks break down, clay gets destroyed, paint washes off of walls. So that might last a long time, but it's not going to last as long as those things up there. They have a really long life of where there's very little change. And so, if we're talking about consciousness, we're talking about what it is to convey patterns and meaning and information and awareness. You want to have the longest meaning available, or medium available. And that's what the stars are. So, I don't think you can truly talk about consciousness without talking about the stars. And I mean that from as most scientific as you can get. We can go really materialistic and really small and look really at the microtubules in the brain. But that's just how consciousness is coming out and emerging. That's not what makes consciousness have meaning. We have, for civilizations long, gotten our information, our timing, our understanding, our patterns from the sky. So the core basic foundation of what it is to be a human being and how to actually participate in this reality start and ends with the stars.
Well, as an astrologer, you can imagine I love hearing this, and I certainly believe in it. But for those who might not quite grasp how can the stars be reflected inside of us?
Well, we have to understand a couple of things. There's a few different levels to us, right? What it is to be a human
Absolutely.
being. Like we
Absolutely.
we have very quickly we have a mind we can think, we have a body we can feel, right? We have a social group. That social group is actually what tells us what is real. I mean, that's how we all live. We know ourselves because of the reflection of our social group. That's an example that's kind of hard sometimes for people to fully understand this, but our names don't exist without the social group telling it. So when we're born into a name that's a memory mnemonic the social group gives us so that we can have a memory of who we are in a reality, so that we can have a lifetime. Okay?
Interesting.
Then there's a deeper level to us, and that's the spirit, right? So, from a biological standpoint, the stars affect us immensely. The skies affect us tremendously. I mean, circadian rhythms, how we go to sleep and wake up. We on the tides and the female cycle of reproduction and hormones. All of these are science-backed ways of understanding how the larger patterns of the physical material world affect and balance this vehicle, right? So that's one way. But on the psychological level, we find deep meaning in the symbolism of the stars, right? Like you're an astrologer, there's a lot of symbolism. So psychologically speaking, they give us the ability to understand deeper sensing of ourselves, not just from looking up at them and being in awe, and then that reflecting back and being like, wow, like look at all the stars, and I'm just here in space, like I'm existing, which is a deep psychological thing. They give us psychological safety because we can actually track where we're at in physical space by the stars. We can navigate by the stars, so they can give us safety in where we're going. But symbolically, psychologically, they can help us begin to identify character traits and understand the deeper meanings within us. Now, that's not the hot gas, astrophysics conversation of the stars. That's the human installed meaning aspect of the stars. And that is where the real power comes in to what we're talking about with what the stars can give us. Because when we understand that the stars communicate a very large, long, deep story about humanity, and that we're in the social species of humanity, and that in those stars is a very deep spiritual conversation, then we can find not only that psychological surety, but then, as we explored, and this is what I talk about in my work, we begin to understand that somehow, in some way, and I've got very deep research to back up what I've come to the conclusion of, but somehow, some way, humanity had the intelligence to understand the basic functions of what it is to be a human being, and they decided to map that in the stars so that it would never be lost and could always be recalled. And that's what we're stumbling into now is we have a world that is deeply challenged with meaninglessness because there is so much meaning. There is so much choice. And that's a magnificent thing. We're at a point now where humanity has worked really hard to create the safety, the security, the structure, and the social constructs to be able to have that deep of a meaningful and meaningless experience. But now we've got to get back to foundations and basics. And when you hear what I have to say about what the stars have to say about that, it's pretty fantastic.
I know I'm excited about it. You kind of hinted at the fact that we're in a pivotal moment right now in human history. And as an astrologer, again, I completely believe that. Do you want to speak to that just a wee bit more?
Yeah, so when I talk about the stars being the oldest manuscript known to mankind, or the greatest cave painting we ever made, right? We want to understand that on that materialistic level, that safety level, that structure level where we can use them as guidance, right? Not just I'm in the middle of a ocean on a boat and I can see where north is at night and I can make sure I'm on the right track, right? But we can use them as a long time scale memory tracker for periods of change that unfortunately in our modern day understanding of reality we've lost. So in most ancient society, why did I even say most? All ancient societies,
Indeed.
All of them. It's not most, it's literally all of them. Anywhere we dig, anywhere we go to traditions, they talk about a time before and a cycle of consciousness, a cycle of awareness. It's called the Yuga cycle in India. It is the Mayans tracked it, the Hopewell, the Mississippian people here in America's tracked it. They tracked it at Chaco Canyon. They tracked it in South America. We
Everywhere.
tracked it in Rome,
Yeah,
everywhere,
everywhere.
Stonehenge. We think we like to believe that the stars were just used for planting and seasonal, more terrestrial understanding, but the reality is they were used for something much larger and much longer. And when you understand what that is saying, then you recognize very quickly and very uh, 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 cleanly that right now is a time where, because of our location in space, and this is astrophysics, and I can show it to you. It's amazing when you look at it. But because of our location in space and our reference point to different aspects of the galaxy, just like the sun affects our circadian rhythms, our awareness, our ability for our biology to be able to pick up and feel and sense an unseen level of awareness, what we would call higher consciousness, is now opening. It went through a very darkened phase over the last 12,000 years, and we decided that we wanted to navigate it and harness the ability of this biology to come into its own individualized, separate identity self, right? And that's the idea of Orion and Aries, right? The emperor, the man with hands raised. That idea gives us the ability to harness the biology's memory, and then from that, we can create a deep identity. The reason you want to create a deep identity is because by having an identity, it's this Trojan horse. Now consciousness is installed in the being. And now we can use the superpower of humanity, which is the only species on the planet that can impact the biology from the inside out. See, every other species, they have to wait on a reaction from the external environment to cue them to fight or flight, or to fight or run or be happy or love, right? We as humanity have a deep, meaningful language and a sense of self and identity, which we know through cognitive science we can use to rewire our brain. And by rewiring our brain, we can cue different neurochemicals. By cueing different neurochemicals, you epigenetically shift your genetic protein expression. And so you literally rewrite the genes. And if this is a cycle, that means that there is deep memory from earlier times in the cycle. And if it was a heightened age and humanity had heightened expression, heightened awareness, then that's all latently stored in our genetics, just waiting for us to practice and participate in the external world in a way that cues that being expressed again internally. And so this is the time where it was prophesied 12,000 years ago, 6,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, quite literally 2,000 years ago. When we made the shift out of Aries to Pisces in the sky, that's all it is in precession, the sun moving. That's all it is. The sun, the chariot of the sun god, changing pathway and moving you forward, right?
Right?
2,000 years ago, we knew we were on a restart. We changed the calendar and we've been living into that new reset where we're going back into the heightened age. Now we're moving into Aquarius, and it's only the beginning, man.
Well, I'm excited.
I,
So
I am
I
too.
can't
That's why
wait.
all this stuff is coming back out now, right?
It is, absolutely. And it's been predicted to come out at this time for a very long time. So,
Which should be very affirming and should be help with the security of the troubling times that we're in.
exactly what I wanted to ask you to speak to. Yes, we are in a very profound time, and I think that people need something to hope for, to look forward to. So that's what we're trying to do here with this event, isn't it?
Yeah, when we look at what was stated, in like the Christian tradition, Christ would talk about, these things are going to happen and just stay the course, know that I'm behind it. You're going to have external volatility. And what that is not only the larger environment moving into a whole other, vibrational portion in space, as strange as that sounds, right? But it
Right.
also is the psychological battles that have to happen in order to create the awareness in the species to choose in higher ways. Because what could happen is we could make choices that continue to sink into our individualistic way of operating, our grab, our protect way of operating. And the stories that we have that talk about that are like the hunter that is the dominant species in the forest and decides to go and kill all of the other animals in the forest. And Artemis really gets mad about that.
Yeah, she
And
did.
so what Artemis does is she asks her mother, "Hey, can we do something about this?" And then he's poisoned by the poison of the scorpion.
The
And
hunter is.
exactly, the hunter is because the hunter won't stop. And
Right.
that is that lower biological aspect of ourselves that doesn't know any better. And we have to use the top down to heal it. So we can't be afraid in these moments because that is the parasite that we're trying to overcome. And if you just feed the parasite with more fear, if you just keep feeding fear because, oh my gosh, this is happening, instead of recognizing, oh no, I'm safe in this. What ends up happening is literally biologically, you're changing your vibration. Not only my interactions, love and joy, good vibes, but quite literally, you're vibrating electromagnetically at a different place in a different way. Your nervous system is sending out a whole different response in the field. And so, by not responding in fear and by not responding in blame, by working it tremendously hard, see, 2,000 years ago, we got an update to our story. Our
Mhm.
story up until that point was about a king and an earthly kingdom and conquering. And we got an update to the story in all major traditions where the hero was not meant to go and try to produce an outcome. The hero was meant to just move into the action of surrender. You still take action, but you do that action out of full surrender to what you're being called to do. And then from there, you don't worry about where it's going to take you. I mean, in the Christian faith, the Western tradition, all the way to death. No friends, no respect, no anything. Spit, right? That's not what most people want to hear when it comes to, why am I following this spiritual path, right? And it's not an excuse for martyrdom. What it is it is permission to walk in faith, permission to sit at the base of the tree and have freedom in the torrent. This is the idea of Odysseus tying himself to the mast and saying, "No, I'm going to be called by all these sirens, and I'm going to get sucked into this." That's the internal world of us. You have all these sweet things that are saying, "No, you need to go over here." All these scary things. No, you walk the middle way right through, stay your course, regulate your system. And then in so doing, that's going to shift the system to where you're going to start receiving higher awareness, higher understanding, higher intelligence, higher information. And that all that information wants to do is help you heal. Because those responses that you want to respond to in fear that are happening, those are just places inside of you and the species that don't know you're safe to go on this journey. And we're all safe to go on this journey, and we all have the right to do it.
And that's a great takeaway. I know that what you're talking about is the hero's journey. And people who come to this lecture and to this event will hear all about the hero's journey from a couple of us speakers. So, with
And
that,
what
go
I'll add, just to make sure,
ahead.
so up until this point, the last 12,000-ish years have been talking about the hero's journey,
Yes,
right?
yes,
I'm going to introduce you to the healer's journey
yes. I
because that's
that's
the one we're starting on.
that's the new one. Yep,
That's the new one.
yep. Art, I thank you so much for being here today, and I'm excited to talk with you and listen to you and to share this event with you. I can't wait, November 1st and 2nd, 2025.
Absolutely. Can't wait to see you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.